today doing another video, and the subject of today's video is going to be on Survivor, and specifically we're going to be talking about really underwhelming returning players in Survivor, which I think is a pretty interesting concept. So obviously if you're familiar with the show at all, they have a lot of seasons where they have just newcomers playing on the show, and then the seasons that people really get excited for, in my opinion, are the seasons where you have returning players in the cast. Sometimes they'll do this by having a tribe of returning players versus a tribe of newbies, like fans versus favorites or fans versus favorites 2. Sometimes they'll have like team captains for each tribe. So like in Guatemala, you had Stephanie on one tribe returning from Palau and Bobby John on the other as like the team captains. They did the same sort of thing with Russell and Boston Rob in Redemption Island, or Coach and Ozzy in South Pacific, or Russell Swan, Skupin, and Varner in Philippines. But I think the seasons that are best are when they have an all-returning player season. Well, sometimes when they're doing the casting for these all-returning player seasons, they might not be able to get all the players that they want because some people might turn it down due to commitments or work or family issues. So they basically sometimes have to dive down deeper into the casting pool and pick returning players who might not be as notable or promising or prominent or interesting as others. And that results in sometimes bringing back some players who don't really warrant making a second comeback. Because they didn't really do much their first time around. And so today I'm going to be reviewing players who were underwhelming when they returned to Survivor, and this is going to be based on if they played a game that was not notable their first time out and then did the same thing their second time. Because if they weren't notable their first time but they came back and were very prominent, a la Kelly Wentworth or Boston Rob, I'm not going to include them because I would say that casting did a good enough job that they were able to see a diamond in the rough and it warranted bringing them back. Because somebody like Boston Rob, I think, was eliminated at the final 10 his original season, but then obviously came back and dominated later seasons. And Kelly Wentworth was like an early boot in her first season. I believe she was like 15 out of 20. But then she got 4th on Second Chance. So obviously she had some gameplay that they saw. But for those couple of examples, there are tons where basically Survivor thought they were picking a diamond in the rough and they did not, and it failed. So I'm going to start going through and talking about why they basically shouldn't have been brought back. So the first 2 groups are from different seasons and like distinct seasons where the casting was pretty suspect. So I'll go through and talk about that first. The first season that has the most questionable returnees is probably no surprise to major Survivor fans. It's Game Changers, which is widely considered like the most weirdly casted all-returning player season ever. And a lot of that was because they didn't really know what they wanted this season to be. It wasn't Second Chance because they had people like Sandra and Tony on and people like Sari and Ozzy on. And it wasn't like a Legends season because you had people like Zeke and Michaela and others who were like newbies and had just been on the season before, so they weren't like legends by any means. Honestly, I don't know what I think you'd call like Game Changers. The better title for the season would be half Second Chance, half these are Jeff Probst's personal favorites, because that's really what the season was. Along with a lot of people that they couldn't get for the cast. Like I know they wanted Earl Cole and I know they wanted Natalie, but neither of them were able to join. Which, by the way, those 2 would have made this season like 100 times better, because I believe Earl probably would have taken like Caleb's place, and I think Natalie was supposed to take Sierra Dawn Thomas's place, so those would have been major improvements. So no surprise there, Caleb and Sierra are 2 of the people I have on my list. Caleb got medevaced, so the reason that they brought him back in for Game Changers was because they thought, he didn't really get a proper chance to see his game through, and they wanted to see what he could do, much like a lot of other returning players from Survivor. And Caleb's really never in either of his 2 seasons showed any like strategic acumen. And for being this really big muscular dude, wasn't really that great at challenges at all either. And socially, he was like middle of the pack, mediocre. So there was really nothing particular about him that would warrant him coming back. Besides that, Sierra Dawn Thomas, very quiet and worlds apart. And although she got really far, she actually got really far, but by seemingly doing much of nothing. And kind of the same deal in Game Changers. Like, got decently far in the game, but also felt like she did nothing to go that far. And I don't know if it's just because they needed like an attractive female in the season that they casted her, but similarly, her Worlds Apart castmate Haley Ford got on, and again, I think Haley was like the merge boot in Worlds Apart, if I'm correct. I think she got like 11th and really didn't do anything special. And I honestly feel like they just brought her back for Game Changers because she's young and attractive, and there's no other reason. Because she was very underwhelming in Game Changers as well, and basically was just a goat and did nothing. Um, Besides them from Game Changers, I have Andrea, who might catch some flack, but I think Andrea is one of the most overrated Survivor players ever. In Redemption Island, she was constantly on the outside of her core alliance. She got voted out and then returned. And somehow I just don't ever really respect people that get voted out and return, because when Survivor is being played in a normal setting, that means that they actually lost. Like yes, Ozzy got fourth in South Pacific, but he also got voted out twice along the way. And so in total, I believe in South Pacific, he actually got voted out 3 different times. And so yes, he got to fourth, but also did he really? Because he got voted out 3 times. Same with Andrea in Redemption Island. She got voted out twice, and I don't know, just something about that doesn't really rub me the right way. And she also got blindsided. Also got blindsided in Caramoan and didn't have an idea of what was going on in the game. Also got blindsided in Game Changers. And for a person who's hailed as being pretty great, she got to 5th once, and besides that, hasn't really ever gotten that far. She's just kind of been an early jury or mid-jury boot. So yeah, I don't think that she really warranted coming back for a Game Changer. She is like not game changing in any way. Jeff Farner I have on here from Game Changers. Had some promise in Outback, but also went pretty early in season 2. But you maybe thought like if things went a different way, he could have controlled the game and gotten really far, but that's not how it went. So they gave him the appropriate try on second chance, which I thought was warranted, and he was basically a relatively early boot. I believe out of like 20 people, he was probably like 15th gone or 16th. So again, I don't really know that based on those 2 performances, he really warranted coming back for a 3rd time. I think that they had perceived him as getting screwed by the swap in second chance, so they wanted to give him like one more go. And again, he basically repeats his performance in Game Changers of being like gets past the initial tribes, and then once they're on the swap, gets booted right away. So I just think that he's like a limited scope of his ability as a Survivor player. Like, he basically, I think, would have to be on a tribe that wins all the challenges up to the merge, and then like in Outback, and then would have to have the numbers going into the merge, and then would kind of just sit in the middle of an alliance and probably get the final 5. That's probably Jeff Varner's best path to a victory. But being an older man who isn't good at challenges, that's just kind of a bad combination for Survivor players, and that's what he is right now. Next, from All Stars, and I'll start to go through these a little bit quicker. Alicia Calloway, I like her, but on Outback, she did like nothing. She got voted out 9th and was just kind of like moody. And honestly, it sounds bad, but I think the only reason she got on All Stars was because Vesepia couldn't be on, and I feel like interestingly, Alicia is the only not white person. I guess Sheehan is on too, but Alicia is the only non-white person basically. And I feel like they were just trying to fill a minority like quota. Even so, they should have had way more people back, like Vesepia and Sean. They're some of the best survivors ever. But Alicia didn't really come back based on her gameplay, I feel like. It was more just because they were trying to fill different demographics, I guess. But I like her a lot, but I just don't think anything she did in Outback was that notable. She got ninth, and then in Game Changers, she basically just sits there and allows herself to be voted out and gets seventh, and was a very passive game player in All Stars. Amber, actually, Amber I shouldn't have on here because she won a season, but based on what she did in, she's more in the Kelly Wentworth field, I guess. She didn't really do anything notable in her first season, but came back and left quite a mark. Actually, I guess similar with Jenna Lewis, she was very invisible in Borneo, but then did really well in All Stars for herself. But again, somebody who you kind of look at and say, like, why did they really even bring back in the first place? And all three of these ladies from All Stars, it's pretty well known that they weren't the ones who they wanted back. Alicia Calloway, they actually wanted Vesepia back, but she had work commitments. Amber, they actually wanted Elizabeth Hasselbeck back, but she didn't want to play again. And then Jenna Lewis, they actually wanted Colleen Haskell back, but she turned it down, and so they went to Jenna. Yeah, so none of them were really wanted in the first place for their season. And next, I'm not ranking them by any particular season. It's just kind of a random mishmash. Russell from Redemption Island, I think they should have known that based on how he played in season 19 and 20, people weren't going to be willing to play with him in 22, and he would be a flop, and he was. So I think that was a wasted casting spot. Monica Padilla from Second Chance, the most invisible edit ever in Samoa, so I don't know why they brought her back. Again, one of these things where they probably thought, oh, she's a diamond in the rough, and Jeff thought, like, man, people are going to be so impressed by us when we bring her back and she gets to the end. I guess technically Second Chance was voted on by fans, but I don't know who would have voted for Monica. I bet you it was like she was actually a lot lower, but people who they wanted on didn't want to come back. Kat from Blood vs. Water. Kat was basically a goat in One World, so the fact that they brought her back for Blood vs. Water is kind of ridiculous. I think she literally was just brought back for like entertainment factor because she was really goofy on her first season and basically like a distraction from the gameplay. Candace came back for both Heroes and Villains and All Stars. And I actually think Candace is one of like the weakest parts of the Heroes versus Villains cast, which is like the best cast of all time. Candace definitely did not warrant coming back. She did nothing of note in Cook Islands. She basically betrayed everybody and then was an early merge boot, so I don't know why that warrants you being a returning player. And then she didn't really do anything of note in Heroes versus Villains. She was again a very early merge boot. And then in Blood vs. Water, I think technically she was the third or fourth person voted out, or she was technically the first person voted out, but she was like the fourth person to leave because of Redemption Island. So in 3 appearances, she's never done well on the show, so I don't know why they kept bringing her back. I think Blood vs. Water was because, as a lot of people know, they ran through like 100 people and just kept calling up people and saying, do you want to do the season? Do you want to do the season? And she was one of the people that said yes. But you could look at like half of Survivor players and they've probably gotten called to be on that season 27. Next I have Bobby John from Palau and Guatemala. In Palau he didn't make the merge, but people often said that was just because their tribe was terrible, so he deserved a second chance. And in Guatemala, he was the first jury member, so he barely made the jury. And in actuality, they wanted to vote him out before that, but he like begged and pleaded and just said, all I've ever wanted from Survivor is to be a jury member, so just hold off on voting for me for 1 vote. So like his ultimate goal was only to be on the jury, and that's pretty weak as far as being a Survivor goes. So I think he did not really warrant being on the list. He's kind of like the historic version of Caleb. Like they thought, oh, maybe just because of a really bad situation, he did poorly his first season and like he warrants a comeback. But Bobby John did next to nothing in the second season as well. Next, Brandon Hance. think he's similar to Cat. They only brought him back for entertainment purposes, not for gameplay. Like, nobody ever thinks Brandon Hansen is going to win a season of Survivor, but they just bring him back for the entertainment purposes. Colton came back on Blood versus Water after one world. Basically was pretty terrible at everything about Survivor the first time around, and basically was pretty terrible at everything about Survivor the second time around. He was booted, I think, right before the merge in one world because of his medevac. That is considered a phantom medevac, where he might have been faking the injury to leave. And then in Blood versus Water, obviously, like middle of the pre-merge, he just up and quits out of nowhere because he said it was too hard being away from his boyfriend. So overall, probably one of the worst Survivor players ever, based on him not even getting voted out either time he played, literally just quitting pre-merge. Yeah, he's a disgrace as far as just a Survivor player in general. The last two are people who came back for second chance, who, to me, I get kind of why they brought them back, but they were pretty underwhelming in their second time, and based on their first performance, it didn't really warrant it then. So Vetus. Vetus was a very early merge boot on Blood versus Water, and he was the first boot on second chance. And so obviously when you're a first boot, you don't really have a time to make any impression on the game, and your imprint on the season is as minimal as it could be, which it was. And I get why they kind of brought him back, but even so, he was actually a very early boot in Blood versus Water, and I think he actually was kind of protected even in that season by having Aris as kind of his shield, but without him, people kind of saw through how, I don't know, just about himself he was. And then Shireen, I think she got like 8th or 9th on Worlds Apart, and then came back and was the second boot on second chance. So again, a person who they kind of thought like maybe she has a lot going for her, and like Caleb or Jeff Farner or Bobby John, they thought she just got screwed by her first situation. But no, it's just that her first situation, she probably did about as she's going to do on a show like this. So yeah, those are all people who were really underwhelming when they returned, and to me didn't do anything impressive. And yeah, let me know some other ones if I'm forgetting them in the comments. But I would say from original seasons, there's a lot of people from Australian Outback, One World, and Worlds Apart on here. Those are kind of 3 seasons where you think to yourself, why did they bring these people back? That's all I got for today, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.